Hello, and welcome to Food for You and the Planet, a fresh new podcast that explores healthy and environmentally sustainable food solutions. This podcast is brought to you by Healthy Plan Eat Online Farmers Market. I'm Dr. Rosemary Ostfeld, and I'm your host. Together, we'll hear from leaders in environmental science, agriculture, medicine, nutrition, entrepreneurship, and more. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to hear all the latest in healthy and sustainable food with Food for You and the Planet. Today's episode features Orsi Dezsi, Executive Director of the Organic Materials Review Institute, OMRI. Orsi holds a BA in History and Russian and Eastern European Studies and a Master's in Public Administration with a focus in nonprofit management. For the past 20 years, she has worked closely with the regulatory community, industry stakeholders, and clients to navigate the evolving global regulatory landscape in both equipment design and food contact material regulations. Outside of work, Orsi is actively involved in the community by volunteering at a local animal rescue and food pantry. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Awesome. We're going to start off with our first question. So, what is the Organic Materials Review Institute, OMRI, and what type of work does it do?
I'm so glad you asked. So, OMRI, some folks might not know this, but we are an independent, nonprofit, non-governmental organization. And when I describe what OMRI does to folks, I often tell people, if you think of that USDA organic label, that's on food, that is the output. So what goes into making these organic foods? What are those inputs? And that's what OMRI verifies. So you have that organic apple. What type of fertilizer might have been used on that apple? What kind of compost? And all of those have to meet the regulations. So an OMRI listed input is not considered organic, but it is reviewed to those organic regulations to make sure that it can be used in organic food processing and growing. So think of organic food as the output and these OMRI inputs as the things that go into it. So
Perfect.
what we do at OMRI, though, I should say, is that we validate that these inputs meet those organic regulations. And we list products. So certifiers, farmers have a place to go and find these inputs that they can use.
How did OMRI begin and why was it originally created?
Well, fourscore and approximately 26 years ago, we had right around the time we had a lot of these organic regulations coming to light. What happens is you have some certifiers like CCOF and others that are certifying the organic foods, the farms, the processors, et cetera. And they had to spend quite a bit of time doing the inputs. And so they thought, you know what? It would be really great if we had this resource in the community that can focus on just the inputs. And it's because of that that we were founded. And so to this day, OMRI maintains a really close relationship with certifiers. And we provide a lot of educational and technical assistance to them as well. But for us, or for them, having something that's OMRI verified is just an easier button that they get to push when they're looking at full organic plans.
That makes a lot of sense because there could be a lot of different types of inputs that producers might want to use. So
Yeah, and I was just going to say we have 10,301 products listed as of yesterday. So the amount of products we have listed is incredible. So definitely a really great resource.
yeah, that sounds like a ton of different products. How does OMRI work with input producers, organic certifiers, and organic farmers?
Well, the input producers, or we call them suppliers, they're the quintessential OMRI client. They're the ones that come to us, bring us their product, ask us to review it, ask us to verify it to either an NOP, which is a US organic regulation, or CORE, the Canadian Organic Regime regulations, and get on our OMRI product list. So we work with them really closely just to make sure that their products comply and really hold their hand through that process and make sure we can hopefully get them to the other side. With certifiers, I had hinted, we do a lot of education and outreach. We have an entire technical department that's really focused on answering their questions. So if there's an input that's listed that maybe one of their food clients is using and they had additional questions, they can call us. If maybe one of their organic food clients is using an input that's not verified and they're doing that review in-house, they might call us for advice. So we're really here to support them and be there for them. And then for farmers, I think our greatest tool by far is that OMRI product list. So if they're looking at inputs that they can use in their operations, it's just another tool in their toolbox to know that acceptability of that is going to be much higher if it's listed with OMRI.
That's great. How is OMRI connected with the U.S. Department of Agriculture National Organic Program, which develops the rules and regulations for all USDA certified organic products?
That's a great question. I did mention at the beginning that OMRI is non-governmental, and I want to restate that because I think sometimes with bodies that verify or list products, that there's a misconception. But the big part of it is that we use the NOP, National Organic Program regulations, or the Canadian Organic Regime regulations as we list these products. So when we're listing a product to an NOP standard, we're verifying that it meets those NOP regulations. In addition, our technical department works pretty closely with the National Organic Standards Board, or the NOSB. When there's questions about inputs, they might ask our technical department, or, we've also worked on some what we call technical reports that we provide to the NOSB on any type of inputs that might be coming up for sunset review that might be controversial, just to see if there's any new information. So OMRI is really working behind the scenes to do that research for that and offer that, again, technical assistance for NOSB or others to make those decisions.
Can you tell me a little bit about the National Organic Standards Board? Not everybody may be familiar with what that is and the type of work that they do.
Absolutely. So the National Organic Standards Board, or NOSB, is a federal advisory board, which is made up of 15 volunteers, and they are assigned typically from across the organic community. So it's very diverse. They have certifiers, they have farmers, they have public interest seats. So really the intent of the board is to be a really diversified representation that guides the organic community forward. And this is a group of folks that meet twice a year in the spring and in the fall. The spring meeting is actually coming up in Milwaukee here that third week in April. And there's public comment periods, but they always work on issues that are really relevant and upcoming for the organic community and really help guide the NOP on some of their decision making and rule making as well.
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier that OMRI has a product list. So what is the OMRI product list, and what types of products may someone find there?
So that the OMRI product list is available, I should say first, on our website. And that I'm going to just state that's the best and most up-to-date information that you can find and where you can find it. We do print a product list as well. And typically there's folks out in the field that might not have an internet connection. So there is that printed list, but we always ask anyone that's intending to use an OMRI list of input to double check that on the website. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Website is the best resource for our OMRI product list. And as I said at the beginning, it really lists inputs that input suppliers make and for their intended end uses. So we have crops, we have livestock, we have processing. So they're all categorized very specifically as to how they can be used. So something might come to us as a fertilizer that is used in crops, but perhaps they want to use it in livestock in a different capacity. The requirements for one specific type of product will be different in crops than it is in livestock, and it might meet one and not the other. So as you're looking through that product list, it's really important to validate that the intended end use of the product and what OMRI verified it for is what you're going to use it for. Because if it's not, then it's probably not going to comply with your organic system plans or your OSPs. So
That's great. That's helpful. How do input producers apply to have their products become OMRI listed?
So we've got a pretty streamlined application process. We have what we call an application kit that a brand new supplier to OMRI that might have never worked with us before would get from our website. And essentially it includes the application and all the information that we would need. So we typically would need an input supplier to disclose their full formulation, manufacturing processes, depending on what type of a product it is. So, for example, high liquid nitrogen fertilizers require us to inspect the facility. So, there's a little bit more information that we need there. Sometimes there's laboratory data. So, that application kit walks them through all of the type of information that we would need. And so, that information comes to us, we collect it, we do a preliminary review. And then if there's anything missing, we'll start engaging with the supplier to provide us any missing information. And then it's under technical review with our technical team. And then we, present our list of findings to the supplier. So, and it might be approved, it might be approved with restrictions, or it might be prohibited. And so there's a lot of different statuses that these products can reach that we work on.
How does OMRI work with experts to independently and transparently verify input materials that are used in organic farming?
So I think the one thing that I will say is, and it's really important to OMRI, is clearly the confidentiality and the confidential business of the suppliers that we work with. And so understanding that our process is incredibly robust and we go into quite a bit of detail getting all of this information is really important for a certifier that is then looking at a food manufacturer's organic systems plan and they're using an OMRI listed input. So they have a lot of assurance in terms of how that was looked at. And again, we might have certifiers or even different organic food producers that come to us and ask us for very specific training on the inputs that they're looking to use, be it technical training on something really specific and how it's looked at in the regulation, or again, just asking us clarification questions for an input that a farmer is trying to use. We really try to be available and a resource to that community.
Yeah, you started to touch upon it a little bit. So how does OMRI provide technical assistance to different players within the supply chain?
I think by far, we do, there's a lot of things. So I would first say we have some really great resources on our website when we get a lot of frequently asked questions or something that's a hot topic that's consistently coming up. We'll include that on our website, include it as a resource for anyone to access. So it's not behind a paywall. So subscribers, suppliers, just folks that are interested in those general questions. We have a quarterly newsletter where we also feature some of those articles. We do offer training. So we've had different stakeholders that come to us and ask for training on specific categories, which we can do and provide. And then we'll do those technical reports and different things for the USDA's NOP program as well. I think really what it comes down to is when someone approaches us and says, hey, can you help with this? We really try to brainstorm ways that we can work with them and collaborate with them to get them the information that they need. And it's really important that we can't consult. That's a big it's a big difference in terms of what we can do. So we can educate about the regulation. We can talk to you about interpretation of the regulation, but I couldn't say to a supplier, this is how you formulate your product to bring it into compliance. So that's a pretty clear distinction for us. So the education portion really is on the regulation and interpretation of the regulation side.
How does OMRI provide education and outreach assistance and who does it offer it to?
So we do education and outreach in a couple different ways. So we have webinars that are pre-recorded as part of OILC, the Organic Integrity Learning Center, through the USDA NOP program. And so those are kind of like your input 101. We've also done webinar, they're in person, so they're live, but webinar style trainings for IOIA, which is the Organic Inspectors Association. And then people come to us and ask us to do training. So we might just put something together for either a certifier or maybe even a manufacturer. And then the other thing that we really like to do is head out to conferences and serve on panels and provide some educational outreach opportunities there. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be at the BPIA conference in DC talking about pesticides for use in organics, or what is allowed. And so I'll be serving on a panel as part of that as well.
What are some of the types of pesticides that can be used by certified organic producers?
It's a great question. And I'm going to just say that it really depends on what it is that someone is growing. When we think of NOP regulations broadly, we're looking at non-synthetic versus synthetic ingredients. And typically we're really interested much more, I shouldn't say we're interested, the regulation heavily leans towards non-synthetics. And so I think it really, you know, prevention, disease control is so dependent on where you live, what region. What we have on the East Coast is very different than when someone experiences on the West Coast versus what someone's going to experience in Georgia as they're growing with all the humidity that they get there. But I think the key factor really is the synthetic versus non-synthetic. There's very few synthetic things that are allowed. So it's just being really careful with the labeling and being really intentional. And that's the other part, I think, too. When you look at an organic system plan that a food manufacturer or farmer goes through, it's about the intentionality. It's about thinking through what methods you've tried. So it really doesn't necessarily just act alone. It's a complete system. And I think that's the point.
Can you tell me a little bit more about an organic system plan? Like, what exactly is it and how is that used in the certification process?
So the OSPs are something that's required for anyone trying to get their food USDA organic certified. So I'll be honest with you, as OMRI, as an organization that verifies inputs, we don't actually look at OSPs, but inputs that farmers and food manufacturers use would appear on their OSPs. So the certifier that certifies the organic food at the end, they're the ones that are evaluating the OSPs. They're probably utilizing it to audit or inspect those facilities when they go out there. So we at OMRI don't get to see those OSPs very much, probably never, but a lot of our products that are listed tend to appear on those OSPs.
Thank you. That's helpful. So what do you think the current state of organic agriculture is like right now in the United States? Like, where is it now, and where do you think it might go in the future?
So that's a great question. I mean, I will say this, I'm really excited about the current state or of organics, especially when I think of the transitioning to organic program, the top program that's being funded by the USDA and NOP. And they're really this idea of focusing and transitioning the land to organic. I think that is phenomenal. And it's just so nice to see that focus and just really having the community, the organic community as a whole, engaged. So NOP has really relied on the certifiers in these key regions to help them execute the top program. So really enabling regionalization of that. So for me, that's really positive, showing that we are looking at that commitment further than just what we have now and really looking to grow the footprint. I also, I think a lot about when I think of organic agriculture or I think of organic food in general, I often think about all of these other labels that come out, sustainable, natural, regenerative. And what I love about organic is that I think organic really does encompass all of those things. And there's regulations and processes behind it. And I think that is, for me, what brings so much trust to that USDA organic label. Because if you ask someone, how is this product natural? Well, it's natural because it came from outside, or it's natural because, but there's no set of requirements or regulations, or there's not like a nationally accepted standard that encompasses that. So when I think ahead to the future of organic, I just want to make sure that we continue to talk about organic and all the things that organic encompasses, and that as any organization, any farmer, any association, organization that is really passionate about sustainability or really passionate about regenerative agriculture, all these words, that they're also just putting all of that emphasis and effort behind organic, because it's what we have. That USDA organic label is such a great example of representative democracy from a farmer's perspective, from the public interest perspective, from the regulatory perspective, from all these different angles. And there's something that when your product is labeled USDA organic, there's actually a lot of regulation, a lot of process, inspection, and a lot of trust that goes into that. And so for me, I just want to make sure that we continue to rally behind that label because of all of the support and work that so many organizations and people are doing across the country for it.
Absolutely. That's so important. Organic has such a long history. Do you have any other final thoughts that you'd like to share or ideas?
So just final thoughts, if just reminding people that if they're looking for any inputs that are verified or OMRI listed, that they can go to our website, omri.org. Our search is really comprehensive. And again, just make sure that you recognize that an OMRI listed input has potentially some restrictions, or make sure that it's for the right industry or it's listed in the right class that you want to use it in. I guess that would be my sort of final thought. Utilize that website. It's a really great resource and a lot of information on there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Orsi. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.